I also did not see, did Sean send an agenda for tonight's meeting?
I did not see that either. I thought
I
we were
did not
going to
either.
talk about,
I did not
Oh.
see one.
we did Article 1 at the last meeting. We were going to move on to Article 2 this week, I thought.
And we
Okay,
did get
and-
So
Anthony's
7
red line
o'clock,
thing.
and then at 7 o'clock, we have the consultant coming in to talk to us and tell us what he can do for us.
Okay. So let's get, what? I'm
There
sorry,
is
go
an
ahead.
agenda posted on the charter review site.
Could you share your screen and just put that up?
I don't think I can try.
Okay, the host disabled on my side, the host, which is Sean, disabled screen sharing, but maybe he gave it to you?
Well, maybe Melanie, you could just email it to us all because you have all of our email addresses in one of those reply to all
Yep,
things.
I can definitely do that.
Perfect. And then Anthony sent us his suggestions. So if you could pull that up so everybody could be looking at that.
So are these his suggestions or are these notes from the last charter review?
No, these are changes that I made to the current charter.
Okay.
Hey, I make a suggestion that when we do the art, I think we agreed that we were going to go through each article at
Mhm.
1 or 2 meetings as we progress through the charter. If we could get them out a little sooner, I didn't get a chance to read them, read the Article 2.
Too. Yeah, me too.
So if we could get them out a little sooner, I would appreciate that.
Did you guys go through Article 1 last meeting? I know you sent it out, Anthony, but did you guys end up
Yes.
going through it?
Yes, we did. Right, Sean? Did we? Did we
Some of
finish
it.
it? I don't
Some
know
of
if
it,
we
not all of it.
Well, we've had
We need to
Article 1
go-
for a while, so we want to go finish that one. That's fine.
All right, that makes sense then. My apologies. I wasn't sure where we stood on that one.
I thought we finished it, but I'm probably wrong.
All right, well, we'll pull it up.
Well, I know he sent the minutes of October 14th. I don't think we got a chance to approve those.
Oh, on the November 4th meeting, you did not have a chance to approve those?
Right.
All right.
So.
Melanie, would you mind adding the October minutes to be reviewed at the next meeting as well, the December meeting? So at that night, we'll review 3 rounds of minutes, so everyone has a chance to look at those.
Yep.
And then if everyone pulled up the charter from Article 1, and again, I apologize for not being at the last meeting. So if someone could tell us how far we got. Unfortunately, I'm working on a tiny screen. It looks like a lot of what Anthony had sent us had to do with grammar and more clerical changes than substantive changes.
No, there's substantive ones built in there as well.
I'm sorry.
There's not as many substantive changes to the section 1 as there are to some of the later sections. So if you look at my comments, the comments would be
Mm-hmm.
substantive changes as well as adding things like the open meeting law. There is quite a bit of, my own grammatical changes.
Has everyone had a chance to review Article 1 that Anthony had gone through?
I did.
In the discussion from the last November 4th meeting, how far did you all get in that one?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Neither do I, but I don't remember anybody having anything controversial to say about it.
No, because it was all just changing in the language and updating the language instead of bulletin board, social media, stuff like that. Town website, you know.
So do you feel that now that Article 1 with these changes would reflect the various media types that we use beyond what was thought of 20 years ago?
Well, we didn't mention Zoom, obviously, but I put town website and then I said add definitions. So somebody needs to come up with a definition about the website. I did not insert a definition.
Yeah,
for it.
I almost think that we're better off being sort of loose with a title, because I'd hate to use Zoom and then, you know, Zoom changes to Google Meet at another thing and people say, oh no, we can't use it. Say some sort of
You could just use video conferencing.
video conferencing, exactly.
I think.
Okay,
Anthony, we're under a temporary order right now, correct? That we can meet this way? And do you think that's going to change back when the governor's order expires?
I have no idea.
So
I think there'll be some
agree with
lobbying because some people like this. I think there might be some lobbying to keep it, but I've got to be honest with you. I personally I hate staring at my screen 8 to 10 hours a day, but
yeah.
I
But
miss
I'm
being
wondering,
with people. I don't know how you feel, Sean. Do you think that boards are going to want to continue to meet this way? I think maybe subcommittees, but I think
Subcommittee, yeah, probably some smaller committee, the major committees probably will have to meet in the front, but some of the smaller ones probably not.
so to
Yeah.
Heidi's point, though, we would probably want to make room for multiple forms of meeting, correct? It should maybe not be limited to Zoom, but maybe
Right.
like Brian said, teleconference is a way to describe a different way of communicating, or remote communication, or some
Well,
sort of.
you could say said something like remote communication, like
Right,
video
to give
conferencing.
examples, so we're
I have a
not,
question though. Prior to COVID and the video conferencing that we're doing now, did you have to meet in person? Is
yes,
that a
Yes.
Massachusetts? Oh, you had to, okay.
yes. This is an exception to the open meeting laws, the open meeting law, and exceptions to town meeting statutes just during the state of the emergency.
Okay. May I make a suggestion maybe for this evening? Anthony mentioned things that he thought were substantive in Article 1. Maybe we could review the ones that Anthony thinks are substantive, and then next meeting, if we can't agree during this meeting, agree on those substantive changes to Article 1.
I
as a way of
second that
moving it.
emotion. I
Yeah.
second that emotion, that's good.
As a way of moving us along.
Yes. So in looking down Article 1, it looks like Section 1 incorporation is fine. Section 2, the short title, not a problem. Powers of the town. Looks straightforward. Division of power. Construction. Intergovernmental relations. So Anthony's comment here is that the statute excludes regulations, special laws, and acts. So you're suggesting we use the word laws rather than statutes.
Correct.
The definition looks fine.
So what would you say is the first substantive change,
Well, I
Anthony?
would say what she just said, changing laws to statutes. Second one would be getting rid of town employees.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Next, we get rid of emergency, because emergency is defined by statute, by the open meeting law. We don't want to have it defined and have it being inconsistent. In the
Anthony, I do have a
charter.
question on that appointing authority.
Which one?
When under definitions, appointing authority, where it talks about employees are not appointed, they are hired and subject to the CBA. In the last town meeting, we determined to appoint the town clerk. And I
Okay.
know that discussed at a later time, but are there other, what I would have considered employees that are appointed in that way?
I don't think so. I think you hire
Appointed
someone.
authority.
You hire them and give them contracts.
Yeah,
I mean, you could argue, I guess
Yeah,
you'd say the
like-
town administrator is appointed, but I don't think that's what this is intended to.
okay.
May I, while
Could
you're
we
on the subject.
could we simply
please.
add or contract? After CBA, could we add or contract? Employment contract? So then we include the town administrator, et cetera.
Could I
Well-
interrupt on the question of employees also? It seems to me that the way it's presently worded implies that every employee is part of the CBA. And back when I was at the Globe, we had 13 unions, and there was a very clear differentiation between employees covered by one of the 13 bargaining units versus a term that Anthony would understand called managers and professionals, who are optionally, at the company's option, excluded from a CBA, and they're dealt with by contract or something else, but they're not subject to the CBA. Now, is town government, public government different where everybody's in the CBA?
Well, I should be careful my qualifiers. At some point, department heads were typically, they were not part of the collective bargaining unit.
Right.
And certain things happened in the town that scared them, and they panicked and they created their own collective bargaining unit. So there's a lot more people now in the town that are covered by collective bargaining units.
So that would be like the police department where they have a superior officers association or something of that nature.
Yes, they have a
Yeah,
separate unit.
so I understand that, but is there anybody at the top of the pile that's not in the CBA besides the town administrator?
There's a handful.
Yeah.
The town
So that
clerk
we ought
right
to
now.
somehow reference that correctly.
Note Steve Mello, Melanie, if you'd put Steve Mello is now in attendance at the meeting. And I believe when he just raised his hand, he was saying he is not part of a collective bargaining unit. Am I correct, Steve?
Good evening. Sorry for my tardiness, and yes, that is correct, Heidi. I am not in a collective bargaining unit.
Okay, not a problem.
We just
Um,
ought to make the wording consistent with the reality.
Correct. So Anthony, how would you,
Yeah, but you have to look at how the appointing authority is used throughout throughout
Document.
the document. And the document, when it's using appointing authority, it's talking about filling vacancies. It's not talking about hiring employees. It's talking about filling vacancies of boards that, or as we call multi-member bodies, because the boards, commissions, we give them more than one name. It's by statute. So we have, so we call it multi-member bodies. And that's really what they're talking about when they're using and as I go through it, if I see the need, if they're talking about appointing authorities when it comes to somebody other than a multi-member body, then.
so
I
these
can-
are people who will not receiving compensation.
When you say these are people, what do you, I'm not sure what you guys are trying to talk about.
I think
Like
we're
the-
trying to talk about town employees who are being paid by the town for professional services, either full-time or part-time, and not volunteer members of various boards and commissions and multi-member bodies. So we're talking about employees like Sean and Christine, for example, on the planning board, and various other employees, Cody, I assume. So, and the question is, how many of those are covered by a CBA? And if there are any not covered by a CBA, how do we refer to them?
we're talking about a definition for appointing authority. We're not talking about a definition for employees at this point. So I'm
Oh,
not
okay,
sure.
so, but the appointing
not sure
authority,
what-
they don't appoint employees, right? They get hired. They appoint the volunteers.
I think the confusion.
What I
Anthony,
need to do is I need to go through the sections of the charter that use the term appointing authority, and I think it's mostly in section 6 to
I
determine
think the
whether or not I
confusion-
do it.
It's in that comment where it says employees are not appointed, they're hired and subject to the CBA. And I think that's the piece, I'm speaking for myself, that's the piece that may have confused me thinking,
Right, but that's a comment. That's not gonna be in the charter. The comments are not
no,
in the
but
charter.
the
It just
comment,
means
I think that comment, I was
Yeah.
looking, how is this covering employees? And in fact, section A does not cover anyone compensated.
I need to go through section 6 of the charter to look to see how appointing authority is used, because I'm doing a search now, and that's where it seems to be used to determine whether or not we need to have some inclusion of town employees.
All right,
It wouldn't be town employees as much, it would be town officials, I think. But
So what I would do-
let me look at that, and I can readdress that at the next meeting.
okay, so I've put kind of a hold on that particular one. I've put it down as 1-7A, and I put a hold on it. So we'll go back later on to look at it. So now moving on. Look straightforward till we get to a reassignment now of letters, because we've got D, elected town officer. Because we've inserted a Commonwealth, the word Commonwealth, so I mean the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That had not been in this previously.
Right, because it was used several times throughout the body of the charter, so I thought it required a definition.
I think it makes sense as well. So under elected town officer, if limited to the persons elected, it would exclude vacancy appointments under section 3-1.
Yeah, for instance, the select board and planning board just jointly appointed somebody to the planning board to fill a position. So if you say a person elected to the holder of that office, that person would not be counted under this definition because he wasn't elected yet. He was appointed. So that's why I change it from a person elected to the holder of.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
That does make sense. Everyone here tonight, does that make sense? Does anyone have any clarifying questions for that section?
It sounds like it makes sense. I can't find for some reason, I can't find my copy.
Do you want me to email it to you, Sean?
Well,
What's
the
that?
thing I like, Anthony, about that is because you've put to the holder of, the elected town officer in the next election, once they've been appointed to fill the vacancy, the next go round of elections, they have the opportunity to be elected to that, and then they're kind of subsumed in another area. So I think it,
Yeah, I think Anthony's wording is good.
yeah. So next,
Sean, I just emailed that to you.
And thank you.
I don't know how long it'll take, but anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
nope, not a problem. I'm just seeing Anthony took out the emergency, which was the old section D, emergency. And as it says here, it's defined in an open meeting law. We would not have a meeting without an open meeting law, so.
Could I make a comment about that?
Yes, Steve.
I don't know if you all saw it, but in the news just today, there was a huge issue in the Boston School Committee about things that happened in a Zoom meeting while in simultaneous text messages and whether they ought to be subject to open meeting laws or not. And the Globe won a Freedom of Information request that got those text messages. So I think we ought to have language that, this goes back to an earlier part of the discussion, we should assume that in the next 10 years, certainly by the later 10 years, we're going to be having various kinds of electronic meetings. And the state's going to weigh in on what is or isn't subject to the open meeting law, which if you're in the middle of a Zoom type open meeting, and you send text messages to each other, I think it's very likely that that will in the future be interpreted as public information or should be available to the public. So we ought to have some fairly broad language that anticipates digital communications in the next 10 years, because I think we're going to have more of it, not less of it. And we obviously don't know what the laws are going to turn out to be, but we can probably phrase our charter in a way that could accommodate those possibilities without being inconsistent with the likelihood.
Steve, I agree with you, and we're recording this session right now. And also, if we chat back and forth, that is also discoverable.
Yes.
And also, as we said in one of our earlier meetings, if we email each other and respond, that's subject to open meeting. There's a, way we need to make sure
Right.
we're not conducting business.
And that's, except that we could have an email between one and another of us, but just can't go down a daisy chain on the same subject. Right.
Correct. Good evening, Mary. You just popped up on my screen. Hello.
Hi.
So, let's reflect the attendance that Mary Waite is in attendance this evening. Mary, we're going back over article or section 1 with Anthony's, the information he sent. Unfortunately, there were a number of us who missed the November 4th meeting, and we just felt we needed to go down and make sure we're all clear on everything.
Fair. Mhm.
So also Anthony recommended that we take out the full multiple member body, which is letter E in the original, as it only appears there. And then F, general laws.
Mhm.
And Anthony has offered it as G now.
Mhm.
And I have to say, it looks straightforward. Enacted on December 22nd, 1920, almost 100 years ago, and they're still standing. F, it has local newspaper. Is
Can I
this
hold-
area that we should be adding
Electronic?
electronic or?
I think so. Mhm.
Well, this is just the definition. It's used later on when we find out where it's used. If you want to also have other posts, I think it might be used in the town meeting section where it talks about putting notice in the local newspaper.
Should we?
You
should
would also,
we-
you could also add in other means for
Media.
posting. For instance,
about
right
local
now,
media?
it has, right now, when we get to it, the next section, you'll see section 2, it talks about a police officer posting the warrant on the town bulletin board. Obviously, we need to change that.
But I'm wondering here though, Anthony, where local newspaper, a number of folks may get the local newspaper, the South Coast Today, as an email into their, as opposed to the paper.
It's
Or on
still
a
a newspaper.
website.
It's
I'm sorry.
Or on a website, not just an email. It's the in fact, most newspapers in America now are 3/4 on websites and 1/4 in
Mhm.
print.
Right.
Right, but certain statutes still require posting in a local newspaper, and they use the language of general circulation within the town.
Well,
Why
Anthony, I
couldn't
think
you, why
having
couldn't,
been in the newspaper business, I can tell us with certainty that 10 years from now, those local newspapers will be all digital and the presses are likely to be shut down in most communities. So that's wording that we ought to anticipate and include the digital version.
No,
Why not?
I fully disagree with that. That has to be up through the Commonwealth. That has to be done if that's going to happen if digital circulation is going to be the way in 10 years from now, let the Commonwealth make the law and the towns can adapt to that.
Yeah, no,
The
I,
town
Sean,
shouldn't
I agree with you
anticipate-
completely.
The town should not, this is just a definition of local newspaper. That's all it is.
Yeah, you're
But-
right.
but
But we
if-
should have a definition that could be broad enough to incorporate whatever the state chooses to do.
shall mean, I mean, how much more do you need? The words local newspaper shall mean a newspaper of general circulation within Dartmouth with either a weekly or daily circulation. That's just the definition of a
Why couldn't you
local
just
newspaper.
leave the newspaper in and just put and electronic media, appropriate
That's what I
electronic
was gonna
media?
say.
Right.
Yeah.
tried
Yeah,
to
right
say-
after
Yeah,
daily.
but that, no, you don't put
circulation.
that in the definition section. You would put that, if you want to talk about where something's posted, you would put that in the posting. That's not part of the definition of a local newspaper.
Okay,
Right
so
now,
mine,
this
say
is
local
similar
media?
to how, for instance, if we have a zoning bylaw change, the planning board needs to have a public hearing. The statute requires them to post 14 days prior to the public hearing in a local newspaper, which they define as a newspaper of general circulation with either a weekly or daily circulation within the town. So this is consistent with general law right now. This is just the definition of newspaper. This isn't where we can post. If you want to add where you can post, you'd put that in that section.
okay,
whatever
so we
section,
will,
likely in
I
section
just
2
put a
when we get to
hold,
town.
a hold on this one again so that we can make sure we've included the electronic media at a later time. So
May I ask
under,
a question, when we finish
Oh,
our
Steve.
charter review, do we have to run that by the state in some way?
So,
Yeah, so if we have to run it by the state, what we should do is put in a question on behalf of ourselves and all the other 350 towns, since there are 351 total, that that the state clarify about the definition of newspaper. Same words for everybody.
Thirsty.
all right, I've put that in my notes.
Thank you.
Next, majority vote.
All that's gonna happen is the Attorney General is gonna look at it and see if there's anything that runs afoul of the law. They're not gonna answer questions.
Mhm. In other words, they're not going to anticipate future laws, even though this is a 10-year document.
That's not what they're not helping us write the charter. They just look to see if it runs afoul of any statutes, if it's conflicting with any statutes.
Right, okay.
Just like when we pass bylaws, they'll do a review to see if it's inconsistent with or it conflicts with the statute.
Majority vote, G, looks straightforward. And then we have that multiple member body, which is, has been moved down here. And I think all we're really adding is the word 3 or more persons, that it cannot be 2 people. Doesn't look like an issue. And then I, which is now open meeting law, which is new to the document. And then the word quorum, your recommendation, Anthony, is to omit this?
Yes, we talk about it where it's used in the document.
Okay. And then we're adding in M, special law. Does anyone have any questions on that one? It reads straightforward to me, but
I don't want to get picky and I don't want to get smarmy or smart alecky, but you know, you try to anticipate questions or concerns. With this, I guess with this, I'm not sure how to say it. Say it carefully. With this gender identity thing going on, whether people choose to be male, female, neutral, whatever. The term select person, can we just
Oh, sorry.
anticipate getting rid of male or female?
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. I like that. You can just say a
Shall be
person.
used to describe a person
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
you're
holding
right.
the
That's
office.
fair. And that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
I'm
foresee
sorry, Sean. I
somebody.
thought you were agonizing over special law.
No,
did I.
no, it's not.
I was
You know,
gonna say, what's
I
wong
mean,
with special law?
Special
mean,
law, yeah.
let's put it this way. I don't want to be picayune. I really don't.
Nope,
I don't want to
nope.
be in the
But-
minutia. But
but-
I
No,
would
actually-
I
see-
think that's a good suggestion.
That's a
I mean,
very,
I have somebody that's got their britches in a bunch because the police department posts quotes every day, and they got hurt over one quote,
Okay.
and they're causing such a row to do, you know. I can see somebody.
I think just.
Oh, look what Dartmouth's doing. They're only, they're not transgender friendly, or they're not, alien
Yep.
friendly,
Totally right.
or whatever.
We won't
totally
charge,
right.
we won't
At
charge.
least, at least when you say it's a person, a dog can't run for select person, select board.
Yeah, well, you don't know.
It might win though,
I'd
Sean.
have to blow
Right,
it
if they get the signatures.
Hey, believe me, if a schnauzer can beat me, they can have it.
All right,
popular
that being
today,
said, I
so.
think Sean makes a great point, and we will strike male or female from that
That's good. Mhm.
definition, and that ends that.
Yeah.
So M, special law.
And nobody will have to choose.
Questions or concerns on M, special law? Thank you, Anthony, for adding it. I think it makes sense. The next
looks
one,
good.
which is town agency, there's town, which seems clear, town agency.
Anthony, just one really quick, again, with the minutia, where it says shall mean the town of Dartmouth, should that town be in capital?
On N.
Yeah.
Well, I actually went back and forth on that because it then becomes town capital later, but it could read either way.
Yeah, I know.
I actually went
I
back
think it
and
should be
forth on that.
lowercase.
I know whenever I mention town, and no matter where I type in either social media, I don't say town of Dartmouth, but if I mention town, I always capitalize it for some reason. Maybe it's out of reverence, or maybe it's just because my fat finger hits the cap lock button. I don't know.
No, if you're talking about the town, it's capitalized. If you're talking about a town generally,
Right.
it's lowercase, so.
Correct.
In town agency, but not
Yeah,
including the town meeting or the school committee. I think school committee needs to be capitalized, and is those the
Does.
only two?
Yeah, it's every like 3 or 4 weeks.
No, not 3, at least 4, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know.
What?
That's Chris, we can hear you. Whoever Chris is.
See if Chris's iPad, it's now muted.
School committee definitely needs to be capitalized.
But are those the only two, Anthony? Town meeting and school committee? That falls into that.
Can he hear you?
Yeah, I gotta remember why I did town, I have to go look back and see how town agency is used in the body to see why I did that.
Shall mean any multiple member body and any department, division, or office of the town, but not including the town meeting or the school committee.
Well, town meeting is not an agency.
No,
School committee is part of the school department. So I
But
would think-
their town, school committee, a multi-member body is a school committee and town meeting are multi-member bodies. So the purpose of using town agency is when we want to exclude those two. I'm looking to see how it was used. Yeah, it's used in ways in charter, like if you go to Article 4, that talks about abolishing a town agency. So obviously, you can't the select board can't abolish the school committee, they can't abolish town meeting. Or
Oh, bingo.
it's used a lot. I need to go through and figure out why,
Okay, so-
how it's used.
So I'm gonna put, in my notes, a hold on O town agency, and that's something that later on we will
All right.
Yep.
double check on.
Selected.
Okay. I was gonna leave it up to Sean to come up with a town website definition.
Okay,
Tom McGinnis, I figured he could probably do a better job on that than I could.
all right, so I'm gonna put that down as a hold. And I think we will also be thinking about, do we need to add a definition of electronic communications or something? Next, we have Q, which is town meeting.
I added that because it was repeatedly used lowercase representative town meeting throughout, and we need to, repeatedly reference town meeting, so I need to make that a defined term.
And it was not in the original document, so that makes sense.
Can I make a comment going back just one little bit? I've been in several other organizations where there's an official electronic communication, which is usually at this point a website. There's unofficial ones, which can include things like a Facebook page. And a couple of organizations have gotten in trouble by failing to differentiate between casual conversation and formal town business. So whatever Sean comes up with for the website, if that's what it's going to be, if that's going to be an official communication, there ought to be a clause in there that says all other electronic communications are unofficial unless they're also referenced on the website or something to that effect.
I've just noted that, Steve.
Thanks.
So looking back at Q, town meeting, and then the next one, which is town officer, should be R.
Yep.
It's listed as Q again.
Right.
And it does certainly sound like town officer is a term that we need to have represented here.
It was already there, I just changed it. a little.
Cleaned it up. But that's now R,
It's
and
used-
then the last one, voters, would be S. All right. So we have about 15 minutes before the organization comes to speak to us.
Mhm.
Does everyone have the proposal up from them?
Yes.
No, I
Did you-
don't.
I don't. Did you email it, Cody?
I think Sean emailed it. I'll email it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just sent it to everyone. So let's see. So Michael Ward is the director over at the Collins Center. He can't join us tonight. He had a prior commitment for another town. But Marilyn Contreras and Kim Wells will be joining us. And so Marilyn will be able to answer any questions about substance related to the process. And Kim can speak about the actual scope, the management and the staff that would be involved.
Cody, did you say that you emailed that to us?
I just sent it.
Yeah, I have it. Actually, Sean had sent it.
Yeah, I got it too earlier.
When did Sean send it
November
today?
2nd, I think.
I have 1,000 emails from Sean, so that'll take me an hour from.
Yeah, it's that
I
big
just sent-
with 2 attachments.
Again, it was November 2nd, I believe.
That's correct.
I just got it.
Okay.
So I don't know if everyone's had a chance to review it. If you haven't, right now might be a good time to just briefly look over it. And if you want to come up with some questions, that way there, we can be prepared for them.
Here's my thing is I hate to give somebody a document that we already know we're going to change. It would make sense if you are going to use an expert, if you decide to go that route, to at least make some of our changes first. So they're not just doing what I already did.
Right.
Amen.
Well,
fact,
the other thing is, I assume we're not going to make a decision tonight. I assume we're going to read this, listen to what they have to say, and then next meeting have a discussion, or submit something in writing after we have the presentation this evening.
But in addition to what you just said, it seems consistent with what Anthony just said. If we hire anybody as an outsider to help us with things, they should not be hired till we've already done the grammar, punctuation, and basic redlining stuff. We hire them after that to advise us on potentially any substantive stuff that we might have missed. But we certainly don't want to pay money to do Anthony's job over again. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they'll be able to elaborate on it. When I had spoken to them, Sean and I had briefly spoken to them, it's basically, it's whatever you guys as a committee choose that you want them to do. So where Anthony has gone through and looked at grammatical errors and stuff like that, we could tell them, we don't need assistance with that, but we want you to look at it for substantive changes, compare it to other towns that you've worked with or anything like that, really.
Right.
But they also say that it's text that's more up to date and aligned with current state laws and best practices, and I'm doing some of that as well.
So if you guys decide to move forward, we could just let them know that we wouldn't want that part of their service. They said it's pretty, you could make it happen.
What you're going to have to do is, once you have a discussion on what you want from them, probably Sean is going to have to redraft their proposal, putting down what we want, and send it back to them. And then what they'll do is mark it up again and then send it back to him for a signature. So you're right, you have to really exclude what you don't want them to do and put in what you need them to do.
Has there been any discussion? Last time I talked with this group, there was conversation about the process. Has there been any, it sounds like we're into looking at chapter by chapter. Is that what people decided they wanted to do? Because we had talked about how to decide what to change and all of that. It sounds like, has that already been decided by people?
Last time we left it, there was 2 suggestions. One, go through the grammar and the changes that Anthony has redlined. Do that first. And then get into substantive changes, or do the grammatical changes or what Anthony has done, and then consider the more substantive changes that might be made in each article as you reviewed the grammar, plus whatever controversial issues there were, if that's the right word, on each article.
I guess are people thinking the Collins Center would meet just with this charter commission? Or are they meeting with other groups? Are they doing focus groups? That's what I'm trying to understand. What are we looking for the Collins Center to do? Because if we're just looking for somebody to go through chapter by chapter like Anthony is, why are we looking at somebody else? Are we looking for them to do it?
I think we were anticipating issues of last time we talked about, for instance, Sean McDonald brought up the whole idea of possibly cutting the number of town meeting members. Mm-hmm. And there was some controversy about why we would want to do that, what the town's experience were, was it successful, what were the pitfalls in rewriting it, or whatever. Stuff that we felt that we didn't have, other than opinions, had substantive information on. So I think that was one way to use them, which was when we had questions, to see what other towns had done, not to reinvent the wheel, but find out what other towns have done and whether they were successful or where they ran into problems after they made changes to their charters. But there was no consensus about how we would use a consultant in the last meeting, or if indeed we would use them at all.
And I have a note from 2 meetings ago that I think Sean was also going to be looking to see if there were any other consulting firms. So we wouldn't be looking at just one, but if there were any others. But I certainly see the point of the work that Anthony is doing. Is that the work that we would be paying this group to do, or would they be looking at it at the end? And I do think that as Anthony looks at it and is looking for substantive changes, I almost feel like he can't help himself but to also look at the grammatical inconsistencies as he looks at the document.
But I think the other issue was we were talking about debating these substantive changes before they were put into the grammatically correct document. And the feeling last time was that's where a consultant might be useful, not in doing anything that Anthony's doing now. But if we had questions about what other towns had done and whether they had been successful or unsuccessful with what they had done. Because the benefit of these people, if you read their proposal, is they supposedly have done charter consulting for a whole slew of towns that have similar issues or similar substantial changes that they've made to their current charters.
Okay, thank you.
However, one of the things that they're proposing is this, and what I'm wondering is, we talked about before this goes to the town meeting for review and or a vote, and then to the town to vote, of doing these focus groups. And I'm looking at, would this Collins, the Collins Center, be able to facilitate those sessions for us? Mary?
Heidi, when I just read through it, I read before, is it sounds like they're offering as part of their initial package 3 meetings. So again, if we wanted to go beyond that, that would be an added, if we're thinking we want to have a focus group per article, then that would be, adding on to their base cost. That was my understanding, because what they have in their proposal, it's $7,500 for the 3 meetings. So
I do see that, a total of 3 meetings.
yeah. So I mean, so again, the way I look at it, is that interpreted is that it's kind of a that we can, cherry pick what we want for them to do within, but again, that's the package that they're giving us. And I did think that, again, we were largely talking about relying on their research of other towns,
So,
that's going to be something across.
Yeah. So for instance, I think Sean had, we sort of left it with him. And I think he sort of agreed to do it, was to reach out and do some research on the effect of, if that's the right word, of cutting a town meeting from 400 and some odd people on paper and X number only show up. Say, I'm just making this up. What would be the effect of other towns that have cut their meeting to say 200 people?
Right.
And were they successful? Was there a benefit? Was it more effective and efficient? Did it cut down on having late meetings that go on into the night because you can't get a quorum, and all these other questions that were raised at the last meeting? So I think I agree with Mary that, what we could do is we don't have to meet with them. We could just ask them, send them a question and ask them to research it for us. When and if we get to that point.
And if I could add to Mary and Brian's comment, I think the last thing we need for a review of the charter is a focus group. That kind of a focus group is useful for something like the master plan, but to review the charter, the smaller the group, as long as you've got enough collective insight into how it ought to work, the better. If you have a giant group, you'll never get the charter reviewed.
All right, so it looks like Kimberly Walls has joined us. Hi, Kimberly, how are you?
Hello there. Very well. Thank you.
Is Marilyn joining us as well?
Marilyn should be joining as well. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Of course. Thanks for having us. I'm not sure if I was interrupting another discussion, but
No, we were prepping for your arrival.
okay.
We were talking about you. Were your ears buzzing?
But Kimberly, would you tell us, the letter we got was from Michael Ward, the director?
Yep.
So could you, and that's the only name we have in connection. So could you tell
Okay.
us who you are and your connection?
Sure, absolutely. So just, is everyone familiar with the center in general? So the center
No.
being, the Collins Center being an entity that was created by the legislature back in 2008 to provide technical assistance to municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. So we currently are a team of about 20 to 30, with a handful of us being full-time project managers of various projects across sort of all facets of municipal government, right? So we're doing charter work in some cases, we're doing a lot of finance work, we're doing a lot of HR work, a lot of IT work. So we see, you know, a lot of the various municipal departments throughout the course of our projects. As you mentioned, Mike, the director, has been the director for, I guess, about a year. Prior to that, Steve McGoldrick was the director, and Steve is also part of our charter team now. So he's done extensive work on charters, as has Mike, as is Marilyn, who's joining us, and as have a few of our other team members, myself, Sarah Concannon, who is another one of our public services managers, and then we also have a team of analysts who kind of help support the research and the other work that we do.
So can we,
Agency?
Kimberly?
Sorry.
Are you funded by the state?
Not exactly. Sometimes we have been granted an earmark in the state budget, not consistently. Initially, that is how the center was started, but now what we do is we fund through the projects that we work. So a lot of those are also through state grants, so the filtering kind of comes back around. We do a lot of work with DLS, the Division of Local Services, and their Community Compact program. So the Community Compact Best Practices grants, the Community Compact grants, we can, you know, kind of help municipalities make those applications and then also help kind of do the work if they are awarded.
So I see that we've also been joined by someone dialing in. Did that person identify themselves?
Yes, this is Marilyn Contrias from the Collins Center.
Okay. Marilyn, could you spell your last name for us?
CONTREAS as in Sam.
Thank you.
So it might be beneficial for us to get started if you guys could just give an overview of some of the services you've offered for other towns, and then the group can, if they have some questions, can ask some questions based off of that.
Sure. So thinking about services specific to charter work, I know the scope that was provided sort of articulates doing a review and presenting a memo to the committee, and then being present for a few selected meetings, either to help facilitate, to provide guidance, to conduct research. And most of our projects historically, we have taken a pretty significant role. So really being the ones to help steer the process, being at every meeting, helping with drafting, managing the draft, doing research for each of the meetings. Each committee or commission certainly has varying levels of time that you're able to devote to the work. So I think in the case where you know, where that time doesn't necessarily exist on the front end for most of you, that is where we can be that resource. But we also can kind of take that step further back to, like, you know, review things that you've already drafted, or as I said, do the research, provide guidance, provide comps, offer suggestions as to, you know, we could take this path, we could take this path, help you think through the parameters of those things, help you think through the implications as it relates to Mass General laws or to your bylaws, or how those things all kind of come together. So I think we're really flexible in terms of the needs of the committee with what we are able to provide, and overall have pretty extensive and in-depth experience with charters, having I think the center has done work in about probably 15 or so, with more sort of ad hoc, and then Marilyn has probably worked on even more than that individually. So yeah, so sort of whatever works for you, I think we can probably come up with a framework to accommodate that.
So, Kimberly, just a question. So if we wanted to use you, for instance, we were having a discussion last week about the number of town meeting members, and perhaps we have too many, and it affects the effect of, we think it might affect the efficiency of the meetings and efficacy of the meetings. So what I think I'm hearing is, if we posed a question to you, something to the effect, how many towns, or have you worked with towns that have done this, and what has been the effect, the pros and cons of doing it as a result of it actually being implemented? So we could use you, I think, if you're saying yes, we could use you as a sounding board for these sort of questions that we have, and you would go out and do the, if you don't already know, do the research on questions to know, so we don't reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that research can take a number of forms. For some things where you may just want to get a sense of what the comparisons are that are out there, we could put together, you know, a spreadsheet for you that says, here are some comparable communities, here's what they're doing. And you can just use that as background information. For something where you might want more in-depth information, we could either do an online survey, or we could target a few places to reach out to ask those questions in order to kind of come back with that more detailed information for you. So there's,
if I could jump in, I think Brian was also asking about maybe seeking your personal professional opinions about if Town A tried to cut the size of their town meeting and they had a little bit of a disaster, and Town B cut the size of their town meeting and it worked out great. We'd like to understand the reasons why one was one and one was the other, without having to necessarily do research about the details or statistics about how many towns have done it or not, but actually getting some advice on the best way to do it.
yes. So I'm going to stay away from saying that we're going to make a suggestion or a concrete recommendation, because a lot of that really is dependent on the factors that are going to be the things that you know more about the town. But we can do exactly kind of what you've described, which is set up those parameters. So here are the factors that Town A weighed. Here's what went wrong. Here's what went great, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
you would have that information work from. But I do want to sort of make clear that we don't intend to come in and say, this is the best number to have, we think you should do that.
Right. I understand, and I think what you just said is exactly what we're looking for. Is that right, Brian?
That'd be what I'd be looking for. I'd be looking for somebody to be, but that's just me. I'd be looking for somebody to be a resource, so that when we had questions and looked around our meeting and said, well, it's this, all our information is anecdotal in this group, that perhaps somebody can go out and take a look and find out people have actually done, towns that have actually done this. So it's removed from anecdotal or think or opinions or whatever, and it turns out to be based on fact that somebody's already done it. And this is how it worked out well. This is how it didn't work out well. And what we're looking for is that information. We can make our own decision, I think.
I disagree that it's anecdotal. I mean, Sean, myself, and some others here have had a lot of experience with town meeting. So I think we have our own.
Well, you have, it's anecdotal to the fact that it's the existing setup, and it's an opinion in terms of not knowing, because you're not involved with it, what other towns have done. That's why I say it's anecdotal. In terms of what the effect would be on changing something like the number of folks that are at a town meeting, or the number of people that are part of town meeting membership.
You know, I think one other thing that, you know, potentially could be useful if the group decided to move forward is, you know, the Collins Center, once the group has decided on amendments, Collins Center, you know, obviously is seen through a lot of different charter reviews, so they could assist with, I guess, just how you're going to present it at town meeting. I know that was an issue at the last charter review committee, is that there were some great amendments, but it didn't end up passing at town meeting. So, you know, it was dead in the water. So, you know, that's another thing I'm sure the Collins Center has experience with.
Well, I think there was a basic paper that Sean had sent out from Clark University. It was a little dated from 2010. And it had about 10 or 11 towns that had done things to their charter, and which ones were successful and which weren't. And so along those lines, some of it was in that paper talking about where they made, I'll use the word mistakes, but where they weren't able to do the right things to get the recommendations approved by town meeting. So
Yeah.
again, that's another research point.
It is.
Our recent experience with what failed last time, and the same local consultant or town council that knows why that failed and what the pushback was along the way. And that, to me, is more relevant, but that's my 2 cents.
Anthony, that sounds like a discussion point that we need some clarification on when
Steve,
we're
can you
not
take a
entertaining the
second?
Collins Center. What happened 10 years ago. But as far as what the Collins Center can offer in looking at the proposal, which was included 3, I'll call them in-person meetings, although right now we feel they're probably remote meetings.
Right.
And we're doing, I think one of the things our group needs to do is identify some of the research pieces. Like we know one is this number of town meeting members and that structure. But we really have not looked at the document enough to know if there are other pieces within the document. We've spent a considerable amount of time tonight prior to your joining us talking about that this document does not reflect any of the social media and the current, everything is assumed that it's in a paper form and that it's done in person. And one of the things we know now is that we need to, this document needs to reflect how things are currently happening, and God knows in the next 10 years what that would look like.
Yep, so I'll elaborate a little bit on the sort of first step, which is the provision of a memo that reviews, what the existing charter has to say. And we do tend to separate that into kind of 2 categories. One being the substantive changes. So things like the number of town meeting members, and without having spent time reading it myself, I will apologize for that. I don't know of anything else that jumps out, but oftentimes there are a few things that will stand out as things that could be considered. And by that mean, you might consider them and decide to stay doing exactly what you're doing. But things that I think would be discussion points for making what would be considered the sort of larger changes. And then there's a section where we'll address the smaller pieces, which will be tying in the language, updating to reflect, the ways of doing business now. A lot of times it's even just things like pronouns. Sometimes it's grammatical cleanup. Sometimes it's noting whether, you're a bylaw has changed or something else, an MGL has changed. And so making sure that anything that's referencing back to something else is correct, all of those pieces, which would be, you know, more of cleanup items. So you'll have kind of the two pieces to go from, the cleanup and then the more substantive things that you would want to discuss. And then as you think about which of those you want to address and you map out how your meetings are going to be structured, we could then kind of figure out where it makes sense for us to join you and for us to kind of be the most valuable.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Not to presume anything, but you just discussed a very big difference between a very substantive change like the number of town meeting members and then back into grammatical changes. I think we all in Dartmouth already have a team of people led by Anthony and others who can take care of all that grammatical minutiae, and they already know which state statutes have changed and whatnot. What we may not know is which towns have done a better job, for example, on anticipating the likelihood of future digital communications where everything in the past is talking about quill pens and parchment,
Right.
or ads in the newspaper, which may be all digital in 10 years. And you could really help us with how other towns have anticipated that kind of thing. And then, yes, we can make our own decisions, but I don't think we're going to end up needing a lot of the nitty gritty work because we've already got a team of people doing that. But we could learn a lot if there's 3 or 4 towns that might be way ahead of the curve and anticipating the digital future. And before we write ours, that could be beneficial. Is that the kind of thing you can do?
Yes, I mean, that seems right. I think that would probably fall into something that would lend itself to more substantive discussion. So, right, presumably it would be something that would come up as we review, but also anything that you are flagging is certainly something that we can.
So I have a question. There's has to be some sort of equivalency in the towns that you're going to theoretically compare to us in Dartmouth, and then also say, you know, in towns, I'm making this up as I go along, towns with 35,000 people that have a certain tax base, they have considered and made these substantive changes to the charter, to their charters, and they have been successful on these points, or they have not been successful, and these are the reasons why. Can you do that sort of work as well?
So I think that we want to be careful about coming up with the places that you want to compare yourself to before we decide what we're comparing.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting only that whatever, if we engage you, whatever towns that you're going to give us that have made changes, that they're equivalent to us on some level. So we're not comparing a town with a lower tax base, again, with 10,000 people to us at a particular tax base with 35,000 people.
Sure. I think in many cases, our approach would be to find the most similar town. But I do think I wouldn't rule out the possibility that it might be a larger city. It might be a much smaller town who has done something that could be valuable. So if that's, you know, if you're considering something like that and what you're wanting to know is what have other towns done, and the reference point is not exactly the demographics of Dartmouth, let's say, we wouldn't exclude that just for the sake of excluding it. Okay. Especially because we don't see charter work happening constantly. So a lot of towns really haven't undertaken this process, and it can make the framework for comparison a lot smaller than if you're considering something, you know, that might be more pertinent to a specific departmental operation. If you're thinking about, you know, what fire trucks has the neighboring fire departments purchased, everybody's going to be doing that within approximately the same time frame, whereas charter review is really not subject to that quite so much. So if things have happened more recently that are relevant, we certainly would not want to leave that out just because the city or town didn't match up. But certainly we can do the research to find comparable communities to share information from.
All right, thank you.
want to make sure everyone had an opportunity to ask any questions of. the
So
call.
I have a question. So suppose we engaged you, what would be the first step on your, the way you work? What would be the first
Yeah,
step?
so the way that I think the scope is written, the way that we've articulated it is to start with writing the memo. So we would do a review and come up with, as I said, the points that stand out to us as substantive discussion points. So we would highlight whatever those things happen to be that could be lend themselves to discussion, that could be cause for larger changes. And if we want to exclude the other component of that because someone else is doing it, we certainly can. But really the review, the writing of that memo, and then we would come to, you know, the first meeting that we would spend with you would be to have a conversation about that and to decide what are the big points that we want to focus on and where are we going to use the center's resources to be the most helpful to you.
So you would be doing
Well,
some sort of, based on your knowledge and experience, having worked with other towns, you'd be looking at our current charter and saying, these are areas that that other towns have worked on. I'm not getting the verbiage.
Yeah,
right,
or
but
things
worked on.
where what we see generally looks different than what Dartmouth is doing.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like that. If it stands out that you have an elected position, and in most cases it's an appointed position, we might highlight that and say, maybe we consider whether this become an appointed position, something along those lines.
But if we, before you write the memo that you're talking about, which requires some research in advance, which is hours that we pay for and so on, we could write a letter that says to you, here's what we would like you to do. And we could say in that letter that we don't need you to worry about things like gender pronouns and whatnot in the language, because we have other people that are going to do that. So we're going to ask you to do exactly what you were just talking about and focus on that and not the other. That's how the back and forth could work. Is that right?
That's true, yes. And anything that you wanted to call out, certainly we can include, but also it wouldn't preclude you from having discussion about that or us from helping you facilitate that discussion or research that item. So it may be that what you're doing is exactly what's normal all across the Commonwealth, but yet you're interested in changing it. And great, we're happy to help you figure out whether that makes sense and whether you could undertake that process. So a lot of our sort of points of reference are going to be, here's what is typical, so to speak. But that I don't want anyone to think that that means that you can't do something that's atypical if you think it's going to be the right fit for Dartmouth.
So, and what would be the logistics in terms of how it would work? Do you take your direction in writing from us, or do you attend a meeting like you were just discussing? And if you, I can't even, I mean, so you get some kind of broad consensus in the meeting and then you move off? You write something down that this is what we understood, and then you go off and do it? So there's some control about what you do and our understanding of what we're paying for?
So in terms of a research component, do you mean, is that the reference?
Well, yeah. So we have the first meeting, and you come back with some substantive things that other towns have done or that stand out to you, and we ask you. Say one of them is the number of people that are in town meeting. So we say, okay, go out and research that, please. So how do we do that? Is it are you still there, Kimberly? I don't see you.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. You're over here. You moved.
Yes.
So in other words, like when I've dealt with consultants before, there's some kind of minutes or something in writing and so this is what we're going to do, and everybody gets to agree, and then you go off and do it. So the idea is we're not no offense, writing you a blank check for going out and doing research.
No, absolutely not. And the scope sort of spells out, like the 3 meetings in general would be focusing on several topics. So if we think about what we would do at any one meeting, it's probably not going to be 10 different topics because that's overwhelming for everyone. And we would take direction ultimately from the chair or a person designated by the chair to kind of make that determination about where our time will be utilized. And we can do that either verbally or in writing. Presumably, there's going to be some in writing component because most communication is going to happen via email as a back and forth with sharing that research, vetting it, editing it, that sort of thing. And then we would come and present it and have the discussion with the committee.
Another question. I'm going to shut up after this because I'm doing most of the talking. I believe there was a $7,500 charge mentioned in your proposal. There's a limit on all this stuff based on the time you guys put in and how much against that $7,500. So I guess what I'm saying is you identify in the first meeting 15, making this up, 15 substantive things. Does that $7,500 cover researching those 15 things, or what does it cover?
So that would be the 3 meetings that we determine we are going to attend. The topics that we're going to cover in those 3 meetings are the things that we will plan to research and be ready to provide evidence on. Generally speaking, we're looking at like 1 major topic per meeting. If it's something that's smaller, certainly we can decide that as an aside when we get to that point. But I think as a general rule of thumb, it would be 1 major topic per meeting. So whatever those topics are that we determine you would want the center to spend their time on, that's where we'll focus.
So just so I'm clear, what you're saying in response to Brian's question is for each of the 3 meetings, we need to write a very clear agenda for you as please do A, B, and C in advance of the meeting and come to us with that kind of information. And that we won't be spending the meeting talking about what you're going to do. We're going to decide in advance what you're going to do. And then we'll pay the money for you to do meeting 1 and meeting 2 and meeting 3. But we're not going to spend the meetings talking about scope of work or any speculation of other things. We have to take responsibility up front for doing for telling you what it is we want you to do.
If what you're looking for is that research, then yes, that's how we'll approach it. Because if we were to come in and lead the whole process, that would be a natural progression from one meeting to the next. So here are the follow-up items that came from this meeting. We're going to do X, Y, Z. You're going to do ABC. Whereas with this, since we're not in every meeting and we don't necessarily know how that conversation is flowing, we would look to you for guidance.
Yes, and if we
more
had you
concrete
run the whole
direction.
process, it would cost a lot more than $7,500, right?
It would.
I got it. Okay.
So let me ask a
we have
question
clarity
then.
on
Let me ask a question in terms of total fees.
Mhm.
So what's your range in terms? So okay, $7,500, 3 meetings, 1 topic per meeting, including research and whatever. So typically, what is an assignment for a chart? I'll use the word charter review.
Mhm.
What does it cost? What's the range? $7,500 up to what?
Up to, I think, probably 45,000. Yeah, and it depends on a number of factors, right? The number of meetings, the schedule that the committee, or in some cases commission, which is more bound, wants to follow. Yeah, and the amount of research that we're doing outside of the meetings versus whether you want us to just come in and help facilitate a meeting. In some cases, if it's a contentious committee, we can, just be useful as that outside sort of mediator. There's a lot of different ways that it can go. Yeah, I think that's an approximate range. I won't promise you that that's the highest, but 45,000 is probably about the high end.
I just wanted to get an idea. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly, thank you for all your details. And I just wanted to ask if Marilyn had any information that she felt she needed to share.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the points that, in terms of working on these reviews, is that sometimes we might present an alternative article if your article appears too dated or cannot be implemented as you intend, so that and it will blend in. It will complement you know, the parts of the charter that are already there. But that's something that I've done several times on these kinds of projects.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
And just one other point, Kimberly, would you be the person, the lead person, or do you assign a junior consultant to do this, or what do you do?
I think that is still TBD, but there would be a project manager, an associate who has extensive charter experience. So it might be our director, it might be our former director, it might be Marilyn, it might be some combination of the three. And then there would likely be an analyst helping with research and possibly also attending meetings as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure any of our committee members who have been unusually quiet during this time have any thoughts or questions for Kimberly or Marilyn. I apologize, I don't see all your faces on my one screen at this point. Trying to go back and forth.
I don't.
Good. All right. So it looks like everybody's questions have been answered. So Kimberly and Marilyn, I want to thank you both for attending this evening. And I believe that Sean McGinnis was the person who made contact with you. Unfortunately, Sean is not at our meeting this evening, but we will be communicating to him any further questions. He had a commitment he couldn't get out of, a family commitment. So I guess we'll say we'll be in touch.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. As you said, you've got my information and it seems like you have Mike's as well. So certainly feel free to reach out to him if you've got questions that you'd like to direct his way as well. And, you know, we're happy to answer any questions that might come up in the meantime. So don't feel like this was, if you didn't think of it right now, all is not lost.
Thank you.
Right. But we're always available.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
Enjoy
thanks.
your evening.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And everyone else, if you could just hang on a moment. Okay, the two folks are no longer with us, but I did want to direct some questions to Anthony. I see you. You have been doing the yeoman's work of this committee thus far. And I know this is one of the responsibilities on your Town of Dartmouth platter. So I'm asking this because certainly the range, which thank you, Brian, for asking that, the range of 7,500 to 45,000 is probably a little bit larger than the town would like us to spend. But in your going through the detail that you're going through the charter, which I'm assuming you're using notes from the previous charter commission's work as well, how best do you feel a group such as this Collins committee could be as a resource for you? Unmute. Unmute.
He said, I don't need them. Over the last 10 years, we've made numerous changes to the charter. I mean, I know the charter backward and forward, whether you hire them or not, I'm still going to do my own review and present my suggestions to the committee because I know the town intimately. So I'm not sure. I don't know what role you guys are looking for them to serve. I mean, it might be a role, but
I know
I'm having a hard time seeing it, to be perfectly blunt.
Okay, thank you. The one piece.
I know this town well. Sean knows the town well. I mean, Sean has probably more historical knowledge than any of us. You could just tell from some of the conversations we've had over the last few meetings about, you know, why there's so many these number of town meeting members and how, when they were elected. I mean,
well, and that seemed to be,
that stuff's invaluable that I don't see these people bringing to the table.
And I think we look at that one piece of research being, is that the one thing we're interested in? I think we can collectively have internal conversations about about the number of town meeting members? And are there unfilled seats and
Yeah,
on
I
average?
think we get through our review of it first and then see what we have for a product and then say, okay, here are some key issues that we're still not resolved on.
Right.
Will they be helping us on those key issues? That's how I,
And I agree with that. I agree with that way of doing it. I think we have to go through it first and decide what substantive issues that we see. And then if we have doubts or questions about what the effect of making some
I
of
see
those
you, Sean.
changes might be, then we could use them if we didn't have the knowledge in-house.
And if I
Thank
could
you.
add one thing to that, I'm assuming that Anthony and his team have experience with certain other towns, and there may be other towns where they don't have experience, but we certainly don't, if they've got 20 years experience with town A, B, and C, then we certainly don't need to hire somebody else to tell us about that, because Anthony and his crew can tell us about that. So we need to be very careful to differentiate what we're asking to pay somebody else to do. Since we're not about to change town council or something, we might as well take advantage of all the institutional memory that we've already got, and then reach out in areas maybe in Western Massachusetts or somewhere where some town might have a really bright idea that we don't know about. That's where we would, use the other people, but not to redo the same stuff that we already know.
Sean McDonald, you had your hand up as well.
Don't forget, this charter commission really can only make certain changes to the charter itself. It cannot change the form of government. As a think tank like the center is good for when you want to do your major changes of the government and a major structure. And as to what we want to accomplish, we're going through the languages. We're going through the language, updating the language, getting rid of some things, bringing it up to, modern speed and adding technology, and we can make some small changes here and there. One of the things to remember, though, is with all this language change, that's going to signal some hairs on the back of a lot of people at town meeting members, because they're going to say, oh, what are they doing? So they're already going to have all this, and we just go through the explanation. We're just updating the language. This is why and whatnot. The last time the Charter Commission was done, they had a lot of changes. Some of them went, some of them didn't. And there was, I guess, the appetite for actually listening to all of it was kind of short at town meeting. So, I mean, whatever we do, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just putting on a new set of treads.
it was also came at the time where certain people are being very preachy about it. And so I think there was a lot of kickback because of the way it was presented, to be honest with you.
And I also hate to say it, but I think it also depends if the voice, with all due respect, is a townie or the voice is someone new to town.
I would say 10 years ago, probably that's the case. Now is not so much the case, because I look at the makeup of the people at town meeting, and the townie side is now kind of like gone this way, and the new townie side is kind of going up a little bit.
It's funny, I was gonna ask that.
Mary?
Yeah, I was
we
gonna ask that question.
we no longer have the Kate Bullards, God rest her soul.
No
basically,
names, no names, Sean.
So
Mary?
I guess I was gonna ask that question. Do we know how many members, in 10 years, what kind of turnover we've had in town meeting? Like, in others, how many, roughly, have we had 50% of town meeting turnover, in the past decade? Just roughly. Again,
I would not know. I would not know that turnover, but I would say in the last 10 years, the numbers of a generation of town meeting members who had been in service to the town for their lifetime have passed.
Right, because I've been on for 6, I
Because
think,
just,
years.
and I'm saying that by thinking about the people who traditionally speak on issues.
Right.
I think one, the
40%.
last 2 meetings, and it was actually June instead of, in June and then in October, those being on the remote, I think have also limited some people from engaging, as opposed to it's much easier to stand up to be recognized versus if they're having audio issues. But I think over time, there have been some folks that have aged out of the process.
Years, because I think I've been on 6, 8 years, so it seems like there's been a turnover the last 2 or 3 years. That's what so I'm curious.
How long do you have to live here to be a townie? Do I count now?
Nope.
We moved in 91.
No,
Not
sorry,
counting.
you had to be born here.
I was just gonna say,
That's
in
my
most of
husband's
New
town.
England, you had to be born here to be.
I wasn't born here, but
You're a
County,
townie.
Sean.
I've been here long
26
enough.
Years doesn't
I've
count.
been
It's
long
gotta
enough
be
around
more.
here. I know where all the bunnies are in the corners.
I'm thank you for bringing the Collins Center to us. I feel that our group with Anthony's invaluable assistance has the ability to work through this process. That being said, and I apologize for missing the November 4th and kind of making us go through probably what would have been the easiest of all sections, section number 1. So we have in our person, we have section number 2 in hand. Anthony sent that to us to review this evening. We did not get to it because we're just past the 7:30 hour. That being said, I'm going to say that we will for sure be looking at section number 2 at our next meeting, December 2nd. And so if we could all look at Anthony's recommendations and have a very clear charge within ourselves that we want to get through section number 2. I will ask that Anthony, prior to December 2nd, if possible, because I realize we've got the holiday, the Thanksgiving break coming up, or close to it, get us out section 3 so we can have a week or so to review it before our next December meeting.
Heidi, can we try and get out 2 sections every time we meet, and that way we'll be sure to have some kind of workflow going.
I did sort of map, if we take 1 section as we did tonight, this will take us the 7 sections till February 24th, doing 1 each. That being said, while I would love to be able to do more than 1, section 1 was really the tiniest.
Easy one.
No, I don't mean do it in 2 in 1 meeting. I meant get the amendments that Anthony has already made from the previous time we had the Charter Review Commission out and have them. And
No,
have
there's
2
been a lot of changes over 10 years. I'm going through them all and making sure that I'm not going to.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I had the impression they were already done.
No, this isn't just me taking something from 10 years ago. This is me going through and spending significant time going through the current version of the charter and
All right,
making.
then I withdraw my statement. 1 at a time is fine.
Well, but I thought, Brian, you were talking about, we're going to work on 1 at a time in the meeting, but if we could
Right.
have 2 at a time come to us so we can be
That-
reading a
that-
week ahead about the following
Yeah, I'll
meeting.
try not to get them to you the morning of, but it's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I
Thank
meant.
you.
Steve.
Thank you,
Get
it's been
2
a
of them
bit.
out.
It's been a little bit busy, but you have it for the next meeting. So
We do. And looking at that, just so that everybody knows, when we are completely, falling, Article 7 is a smaller one. There are hits of this, but some are quite meaty. And
after about 6 hours in a row of doing it, my eyes start to bleed. So
I bet. And if there's anything I can do on my end, Anthony, to
I might borrow those glasses you have. That might help.
This might help me use my new blue my blue.
I know, they're very
lenses, so
impressive.
Get that, but we call them the Dame Edna,
Maybe
Oh,
they suit you.
which
That's good.
which only so many people know.
So what do we get, so we agree at the next meeting, we're gonna do Article 2 and take it as far as we can in the next meeting.
Yes.
A word of warning, when you get to Article 2, I included language just so you could discuss it, but about electronic voting, just so you know it was an issue, but we did try that at town meeting. It wasn't very popular. It was in a prior proposed charter change, so I put it in there so you guys could see it and discuss it, but my personal opinion is it really slowed things down quite a bit. I don't know, Sean, do you feel the same way, or?
What I'm wondering now, though, having experienced
Actually,
that
yeah,
as a
exactly,
town meeting member with that electronic trial, is now that we're in this remote and it pops up on our screen and we have to vote that way.
Right.
I'm
Yeah, I
wondering,
don't know if that records who votes for which on the Zoom, or if it just records the total numbers of yes and no's. I don't know. I can ask Peter Chase from DCTV that
I don't
question.
think it votes, I don't think the person votes. The only time, I can only recall one time where there was a roll call vote at town meeting and it was for a specific purpose. Other than that, most of the time, nobody knows how your town meeting, see, that's why they wanted to go to with the electronic at the meeting. They wanted to do with the electronic devices. So it's sort of like the legislature. So you have a handheld device, you press it and it automatically goes yes to no. And you get the recording real quick and you get the number real quick. And you can be sitting anywhere as long as you're a town meeting member, you have the one and it records how you voted and who voted and how they voted.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't think that slowed it down, Sean?
Um,
I thought it.
the night that
remember it
we,
so
the
it
town
wasn't,
meeting
it
that we
wasn't that
used it,
bad. It wasn't that
I did
bad.
not feel it slowed things down.
No.
I do
I
think,
didn't either.
just like with this change, that there are people who technology eludes them and it makes it difficult. But I do think that there are certainly benefits. I think, prior to that, though, I think all of that makes it very difficult if someone were to call after a vote has been made and they don't like that vote and they decide to call for a quorum. That is probably, as a town meeting member, one of the scariest times to sit there and look at the docket and think, oh gosh, if we no longer have a quorum, we're screwed.
Right.
And
And
I-
that
I'll
might
be honest with you,
give away that we don't have a
I've done
quorum.
it.
Exactly.
I've called the quorum. So, I mean, for
And
our,
I
one of the other
identify
things-
that as a useful tool, but I think when you have those handheld, you know who's there or you know what your quorum is at sort of all times.
Right, you have more accountability.
yeah.
And
One of the other things I
at the October meeting, there was someone, which is one of those things that someone was given the link to the meeting, logged on, and as all of us are sitting there, and they're identifying us, the person is identifying which precinct do you live in? Are you a precinct? Are you a town meeting member? And they said, no, someone gave me this link. And then they were told they couldn't remain on the meeting.
Yeah, that was
Remember
pretty
that.
funny.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, at
People.
town meeting, when we are in person, those people are able to sit to the sides and observe town meeting, which makes
Or watch
this
it
a
on
little
TV.
bit- What, Sean?
Or watch it on TV.
Or watch it on TV. Now, we have removed that element from town government or governing of the town.
But can they watch it on
In-person-
YouTube
In-person view, but it was on
YouTube.
DCTV at the time.
or something like that?
It was
Yeah.
live, so.
They can still watch, they just can't be registered as a town meeting member.
Right.
And beyond, and Anthony's saying that I have all this historical knowledge. To be honest with you, I was just going through the town meeting members because we're trying to look through, as what Mary said, how many people have changed. I'll be honest with you, from my memory correct, it looks like to be no more than 15 people who were here when I first started. So I mean, now I'm bummed because now
Aw.
Because now I mean, I know I've been doing this for 44 years as a town meeting member, but you know, now all of a sudden I'm one of the old guys. Yeah. I'm gonna go home and have a Milky Way.
It's the alternative, Sean.
Yeah, true.
That's right.
Hey,
True. But at least, yeah.
Little mercies.
So, does anyone else have anything for the good of the group?
What I'm gonna do also is find the final charter revisions that were proposed and get them to you so you can look at them, and I'll let you know which ones passed and which ones didn't, so you can see what was discussed 10 years ago. The final ones, there were a lot that were
Yeah.
initially proposed. I
Well,
had
we know
tons
the
of changes.
We know the recount, the recall passed.
That was
Yeah, that was 10 years ago.
yeah.
Can I ask a question? Have we put to bed, or are we just kind of on hold the idea of doing focus groups? Because I know you guys, everyone had brought it up. Are we just putting that on hold and seeing if it's, and kind of dealing with it? Because I think that's how I would, that's my feeling on it, that
Well,
I don't know if it's necessary. And
Steve said the best for focus groups is when you're dealing with master plans and whatnot. Focus
Right, I
groups for
agree.
a charter,
yeah, I don't think so either.
you're gonna
That's why-
have, you're gonna have here, there, here. It'll be like, trying to herd kittens.
Yes.
But that's how I feel about it. But I was just curious I don't know if we had formed a consensus on that or just putting it on hold. So
I think our task is exactly what the initial charge was to review the charter document and bring it up to date.
Yep.
And as far as I look at it, that has given us some work for the next 4 months.
okay.
And I'll be honest with you, not to be the stink in the pot, but for all our work that we do here today, it could be gone away in several months, because the select board can call for an elected town charter, and then everything just stops. Boom, see you later. This is it. Then it's the 9 people who get elected. They take over and they deal with it. So
We could also kick that can down the road and suggest that the changes that we like would require an elected charter and push that up the chain.
I mean, some of the smaller changes, like with, going through the wording, that doesn't, that's not earth shattering. Maybe changing the number of town meeting members, that's not earth shattering. Going from a select board to town council with the town manager, that's earth shattering. That's changing. That's got to be elected. We should not even be dealing with something like that. We can discuss it. We can recommend it, or we can recommend something similar to that. But that's something that we don't have the power to make those big changes. We cannot change the structure on how we do things. We can change the structure within the structure, but we can't change the structure.
The question has been asked, John, and I just want to bring it up, but the issue of an appointed versus elected town clerk, and why wasn't that just put in our hands? Even I believe that level of change would require an elected charter commission, and it's moot because we're not dealing with it. It's going to the voters, but I just want to point out that even a change like that would trigger.
Well, I
No,
think,
I think as long as we don't change the mechanism, as long as we don't change the mechanism of the legislative and executive branches, we can do things like we can change I'll just say, because Steve, you're here, a planning board, for instance, to an appointed board, we can do that. We
Right.
can't change the select board. We can't change town meeting, the legislative branch of the government, without an elected charter commission. But we can change, one of the things that was a focus last time is who reports to whom, because we do have a very fractured form of government. And that was a big issue last time that failed,
Yeah.
giving the town administrator, for instance, more control over certain people in town hall. Those things are probably the most controversial things, that and appointed versus elected boards, that we will be able to discuss. But like
I mean,
Sean
there is
said,
an appetite out there when you talk to people. And one of the things that I get as a select board person is I get, well, you run the town. No, I don't. No, not really. I don't run the town. I can take your concerns and pointing you in the right direction, but I can't tell the planning board what to do. I can't tell the school department what to do. I can't tell the Board of Health what to do. I can't tell the housing authority what to do. You know, and even then, finance committee, I can't tell them what to do. Not that I would want to, you know, but this is the whole thing is, and people want, oh, well, then we should change it. Okay, so then you make the change, then the appetite is somehow lost. Oh, that's too much changes. Okay, but you want to change. Well, no, it's not, it's too much. Okay.
Well, we will see how far we go. Right now, I mean, as far as substantive changes, I think those would be the ones that would need to be brought up, and grammatical and pronoun changes need to happen.
I would suggest the way we do it is what we agreed. Go through the grammar, go through each article, and then find out the ones as we go along, which are permissible to a appointed versus a elected charter commission. And it'll resolve itself on what we can do and what we can't do.
I agree, Brian, and I also think as we go forth and we, you know, like I'm keeping that list of holes, we can also look as we go forth, which may be when we get to bigger things, and say, here is our work, and if they do believe that it should be an elected position, it would be up to us to decide whether or not we want to run for one of those seats.
Right. Or even I would think, well, I don't know if this is possible, but recommend that that there be an elected charter commission as opposed to an appointed one if the changes are substantive enough and we agree that they're the right way to go.
And I do think as we go through these sections, we will see when it does talk about the appointed. And at that time, we may want to say that while the intent every 10 years to do an appointed, maybe what we will propose is every 10 years they do an elected.
Right.
And that way,
Something like that. Yeah. I think it's too early to say yes or no on anything.
I think we've got to look through more things.
Right. I agree. On that note, can I make a motion to adjourn?
Brian, motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I see Sean's hand up. Second. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too, Stacy.
In your home. I guess that's how we're going to do it now.
Yes.
And Zoom with your extended family.
Right. Wear your mask at home while you're eating the turkey.
That's right. And I will
Matthew.
see you all on December 2nd at 6 p.m. And we will, at that point, be looking at approving the minutes of at least 2 previous meetings and looking at section number 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you.
out of curiosity, who's Chris's iPad?
Don't know.
I asked that early on, nobody answered.
And the only thing that's not showing up now is the DCTV, which is usually, so I don't know if Chris is.
Oh, Sean ran the meet. Sean did the meeting. Sean McGinnis. He's the setup for the meeting.
Is Chris perhaps one of the journalists who's covering our misbehavior this evening?
Don't know. They're not going to say.
Just
And I don't
curious.
know who-
I'm teasing, but
And I don't know who lets them in. I don't know that we have a closed.
The only thing is they probably got the link.
yeah.
So
Well, I'm sure this has been riveting.
I'm sure it's somebody nice.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't have to be, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Come on.
I can think of other
Just
ways
kidding.
to spend every other
I'm,
way.
I'm having a lot of fun. On that note, can I leave?
Good.
Can I leave?
Thanks for your motion.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Happy Thanksgiving,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.